It was an awkward conversation. Actually, it was a set of awkward conversations. I was leaving the class, and two women in front of me were heatedly speaking about what they just heard from their professor, and how, just at the core of one of their very being, they opposed everything the professor had just spent 90 minutes talking about. And in my, naivete, arrogance, silliness, and sure to put my foot in my mouth-edness, I walked up and said, well, is it just what he said or how he says it? Because he has a reputation for this kind of thing, and if you can just get past how he says it, you can see a lot of great stuff. They were just staring daggers. And I realized in that moment, this is mansplaining. That's what this is. This is what it's like from the inside. I said, y'all have a great day, and left. At least I think that's what I said. I might have just walked. Weeks, months later, one of the women was talking to other people on campus about her experiences, about not only the ever-present danger that even in this safe place, female flesh seems somehow heir to in our society, but mostly about the casual cruelties, the 1,000 slights that they experience every day. And after hearing about this, I offered, that sounds awful. I'm so sorry that's your experience. If at any time I'm a part of that, well, one, I hope I'm not a part of that. And if I am, I hope you'll tell me. And I will be ready to listen. And she just flat looked at me and said, you have. And I immediately went back to that day. And I said, oh, right. I walked up and I know how wrong that was. And I just started talking. And she looked at me, and everything about her face said, you're doing it again. And I said, you were talking. I'm sorry. Do go on. And she explained that what was wrong about what I did, and maybe some other things that I had done, or maybe some things I was probably doing. And it was a very fruitful conversation. It was really, really awkward. Because despite the fact that we spent all of our time on campus speaking about the true, the right, the good, and the beautiful, it was only in these conversations that we were actually getting real with one another. It was awkward, but it was good. We've been talking the past few weeks about friendship and love, about how Jesus grounds his church not only on doctrine and high theological talk, but on the real connection between him and his disciples, his brothers, his friends. He grounds this church in friendship and love. And we've talked about how love does not happen without speaking the truth. And today, Jesus points out what we're to do as followers of Jesus when that friendship, that love, that truth breaks down. There's an awkward procedure to resolve the conflict or manage the conflict. Well, actually, it's a still more excellent way. This isn't about management. This isn't about resolution. This is about reconciliation. Reunifying what has been broken apart. Here, Jesus teaches us what reconciliation ought to look like for those who would take up their cross and follow him. You see, conflicts aren't managed. To manage is to regain perceived control or dominance over a situation. The fact that things are out of control is the occasion for the confrontation that we desire. This isn't about conflict resolution because most conflicts aren't resolved. And the desire for resolution cannot be prioritized over the truth. I shouldn't forgive you because we're friends. We're friends because we forgive. I'll say that again. You shouldn't forgive because we're friends. We are friends because we forgive. We cannot trade on what we do not create. Instead, Jesus, the practical theologian, not the systematic theologian, gets down to brass tacks here and talks about what it looks like to reconcile. Because there's a peace to be made here and a road to walk. And Jesus encourages his followers to walk it together. Jesus begins his discussion by actually building on a tradition in which reproof and confrontation are part of what it means to love. The need to confront sin and offense is linked to the greatest of commandments. Leviticus 19 says, "You shall not hate in your heart any one of your own kin. You shall reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself." In the very next verse, "You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Reproof, confrontation, reproving neighbors, correcting neighbors is as important and linked to the very idea of what it means to love them. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina said, "Love without reproof is not love at all." Reproof, says another rabbi, leads to peace. A peace where there has been no reproof is no peace. And Jesus understands this. The community is going to have conflicts. People are going to mess up because they're human. And they need to know what happens when the friendship and the truth and the love in which they were brought together breaks down. And he gives them a very simple rule. You have to talk about it. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be gross. You're going to find yourself on the inside of things that you didn't think you could ever be a part of. But it'll be good. You start by going directly to the person involved, and you tell them about the offense, and you hope to correct them. That sometimes is not going to work. So you get witnesses. That's a legal requirement. That comes from Deuteronomy. A single witness shall not suffice to convict any person of any crime or any wrongdoing in connection with any offense that may be committed. Only on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a charge be sustained. You could have gotten it wrong. More than likely, they're still wrong. They just need a show of, wait, am I crazy? So you grab other people and you bring them into the conversation. You widen it. And you talk together. And see if other people see it the same way. And if that doesn't work, you take it to the whole church. I can only imagine what a conflict resolution discussion would look like if we all had to have it out together. But Jesus says it will be good for it. And then he says, and if that doesn't work, then you treat him like a tax collector or a Gentile. Which is interesting, because how does Jesus treat tax collectors and Gentiles? He treats them pretty well. He says that, the centurion has more. I have not seen the faith of the centurion in all of Israel. He called a tax collector to be one of his disciples. He showed himself, the Son of Man, as a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Wisdom is vindicated by her deeds. He blessed the Canaanite woman. Even if you treat them like tax collectors and sinners, as outsiders, you're still treating them pretty well. You're still keeping company with them, because the goal is not dominance or being right or managing the conflict or resolving the conflict. It's about whether or not you can still stay together. Because that's what we need. Jesus demonstrates a practical procedure for keeping it together when everything is falling apart. And the church, which should be defined by this procedure, whose very theology and practice should be this practice of mutual confrontation and truth-telling, does not do this. And when we do, we game the system. Jesus says you confront the accuser. You confront the person who's wronged you. Do we do that? I don't. It's easier to, go to somebody else and talk about it. Talk about them. There's a real cool club on the other side of town where all the cool kids go to sit around and talk bad about the other kids. Politics is avoided, history papered over. We don't speak the truth. We avoid it. We don't confront. We triangulate. We go around. We appeal to authority. We call the cops. And we bring in the guns. We don't seek reconciliation. We are punitive. We're not looking for forgiveness or apology. We're looking to punish, and we appeal and resort to threats and violence. That's our procedure. But every once in a while, we discover Jesus' procedure. Usually to tell powerless people that they're not following it. The smallest agent capable of solving a problem is the one that ought to be doing it. This is the principle of subsidiarity, which means that powerless people are to appeal to the proper authority at the proper time in the proper way. Despite the fact that powerless people usually have to confront institutions, nations, churches, governments for their sins. They're supposed to confront the system despite the fact that the system is the one driving them mad. And they don't look rational and they don't sound sane because they're being driven to that. So how can they submit their petitions in a way that the system will understand? We use the procedure to keep people where they are. What do you do if you don't have friends? What do you do if there's no one you can bring into the discussion? What if you can't confront your accuser? Does Jesus' procedure even get off the ground? We were warned by the prophets about those who would turn these institutions against us, against one another. Isaiah said, "You fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist." You might say that we fast, we use Jesus' procedure only to keep things the way they are, to refer people to others and confront them. When the fast that God chooses, when the procedure that Jesus taught pushes us to loose the bonds of every injustice, undo the straps of every yoke, let the oppressed go free, and break every yoke. We are not here to manage conflict or resolve it. We follow a Savior who has true power and knows our true end. And he seeks reconciliation. He wants us to share our bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into our houses. He wants us, when we see the naked, to cover them and not hide ourselves from one another. So it's time we recovered the procedure both in reality and spirit in this way of peace that Jesus teaches. This community will be defined by its ability to tell the truth and to forgive. Powerful people, and we're all powerful at one time or another, must learn to be reproved, to take criticism, to swallow pride really hard, and apologize. You can do it. It's really easy. But you'll find in situations that you don't want to, even when it's really easy. All it would take is an apology. And we in our pride withhold it to save face, to save our place in a conversation. Jesus teaches humility. The powerful must learn to be reproved, to apologize. And the powerless people, and we're all powerless at one time or another, need to learn to speak, to organize. Ezekiel is given a special task, to be a sentinel, to declare to Israel Israel's sins. And if he doesn't do that, then the guilt recurs on him. It will be left on him. He has to speak up. But this is just a rarefied version of that verse from Leviticus. You shall not hate in your heart anyone. You shall reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. We are all heirs to Ezekiel's prophetic call. We are all prophets, each in our own right. And we need to learn to speak up when we're a victim, when we see wrongdoing. The powerful need to apologize. And the powerless need to organize. And there will be a Christian community that can tell the truth, admit it, and welcome others to it. Because the goal of Jesus' procedure is not a community where the guilty are punished, where conflict is managed and resolved with the swing of a gavel. It's a community of people who can work together, live together, love together, walk together. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, I will be with you. I will be with you. God's desire is not to manage conflict
or resolve it, but to walk with us through all of it. Strange and hard and awkward as it might be.